I am feeling reinvigorated in the why I stay stuff. Doing this for a long time is kind of just like, yay, like I love these stories. It's great. But as I've started to do the listen in episodes and hearing the difficult, soul stretching stories of former members who have left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and really trying to sit with them and hear their stories, it's an incredible experience. It's growing me and stretching me and teaching me in so many ways. And I'm so grateful for the experience. And when I come back to a Why I Stay episode, it feels like coming home. It feels like peace. There's a new appreciation for testimonies and for others who believe like I do. That's all to say. I'm really excited to share with you this episode of Jordan's today, how he talks about a miracle in his life, his little son who needs 1,000,000 surgeries. It's not 1,000,000, but a lot of surgeries, and how a series of promptings took him exactly to the place that he needed to be to get his son the help that he needed. So stick around for that, and then stick around to the end to hear why he stays. But if you want to listen in with me, listen with your heart to people who have left the Church of Jesus Christ and hear their experience about leaving, those episodes air every Friday. So if you want to listen into that, I'd be happy to have you there with us. Okay, guys, let's get into this Why I Stay episode with Jordan Hasting.
I stay.
I stay.
I stay.
I stay.
I stay.
I stay.
I am staying here.
To whom else shall we go?
The Why I Stay podcast, where we find joy in staying in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm your host, Lynzi Clyde, and I want to ask you, why do you stay? Today we have with us Jordan Hasting, not Hastings.
Correct.
Hasting. Jordan is a current member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we're going to hear from him about why he chooses to stay. Before we get into that, I love to just rapidly fire questions at Jordan. So are you ready to answer these personal questions?
Yes, go right ahead.
Here we go. Jordan, how old are you?
32.
Do you have any nicknames?
My nickname was Sprinkles, oftentimes because I like sprinkled donuts.
Nice. What
Yes.
state do you live in?
Utah.
What's your favorite food?
Anything that involves some meat.
What is your current hobby?
Going to the gym early in the morning, about 5 a.m. or so.
Woof. Well, what is your
Yes.
favorite calling you've ever held?
Definitely with the youth. They are definitely my heart and my joy. I love the youth. So
What is a controversial opinion that you hold? Like everybody loves Crocs, but you hate them.
we actually do not own a TV, and I haven't owned one for about 7 years. So
Amazing.
most people own a TV. They always ask me, hey, what do you do if you don't own a TV? And it's like, well, I just don't own a TV. So it makes my life a lot easier.
I really want to do that, but my husband is not on board. So I'll have to talk to you about that later to help me
Give it a try.
convince him. Yeah. What is your biggest dream?
To live in an RV and travel with my family.
What is something about you that is the same now as it was when you were in high school?
I would say definitely my passion for vehicles, for cars. I love everything about them. Back in high school, I also was in automotive club and absolutely love vehicles.
This is your bonus question that I just make
Yes.
up on the spot. If
Do
you could drive any car to work, it wasn't yours, you just got to
Yes.
drive it to and from work, what car would it be?
I think all the young kids would probably say Bugatti, right? They're like, yeah, Bugatti, but that's not ideal for me. I would definitely say a Nissan GTR.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan, for giving us those rapid fire get to know yous. Let's
Yes.
move into your exploratory questions, which are the questions that help us to kind of just get a little glimpse into what living the gospel has meant to you in your life. And
Yes.
the first one we have for you is, what is a basic gospel principle you have gained a testimony of recently?
I think we oftentimes complicate things within the church. So I like the question of a basic principle. I think the issue that we oftentimes as adults run into is like the harder stuff. But I think for me, a basic gospel principle would be an eternal family. The idea, I feel like it's still pretty basic for people to understand, like, hey, we can be a forever family. Well, how do you do that? Well, you go through the process of getting sealed in the temple, which is what my wife and I just did last year. So we actually got sealed in the temple.
Congrats.
Yeah,
That's
thanks.
amazing.
Here on earth, it may seem hard to think about eternity with your kids or cousins or uncles or even sometimes spouse. But I think that the idea behind passing away and knowing you'll see that person again for the rest of eternity is very comforting.
I agree. It is something I take for granted often. And I think part of it is just kind of my mortal mind doesn't quite get what that would look like, right? Like it just
Yes.
doesn't seem like, I just don't know in what capacity are we together, and are we actually all just like sitting around in the same mansion, or or mansions in heaven. But I do have faith that it's something worth working for, if
Yes.
that makes sense. That, like, I believe in a God who gives good gifts,
Hmm.
and he has always shown up for me in that way, even when it didn't turn out the way I wanted to. And so when I'm trying to think about eternal things, I try and just apply that, just especially when it comes to difficult questions about even polygamy and other things like that. Like, I
Yep.
believe in a God who will make it right, whether, like, whatever it is, like, I'm not going to have a problem with it in eternity. Like, that's not celestial kingdom for me, right? Like,
Yes.
whatever family problems we might have in this life, it won't that's not celestial kingdom if we still have those problems, and that it will be made right. So anyway, those are some thoughts
Yeah.
that I've been thinking of, but the basic principle of eternal families is beautiful and something worth working for.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's such a good thing. One of our neighbors, when we first moved into our new home, they had a baby that was born really early, passed away, and they already had, I think, 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to explain to your older kids, when your baby passes away 2 months or 1 month old, and it's like, hey, like, this is really hard, but we will see them again, and we will be sealed together, because they're members of the church and have been sealed together. So it's harder for kids, I think, to grasp too. Even then,
Mm,
as you become an adult, it's like,
yeah,
oh, I want that if it feels right to you.
right. I've had a couple, actually two men pretty close together on the podcast,
Yeah.
two separate episodes, who both talked about experiencing infant loss, and
Mhm.
they just, both of them said it just gives you something to work for. Like, you thought you wanted to be good and follow God before. Like, there's
Yes.
nothing like losing a child that will make
Ugh.
you really just dig deep and do anything to hold on to the hope of being with them again.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that, like, in the easy day to day, kind of in the mundane, I tend to forget about. But it's remembrances like these that it's like, okay, no, this is what's important. This is why we're doing what we're doing.
Yes. I
Yeah,
totally agree.
beautiful. All right, let's move you into your second question, which is,
Yes.
tell us about a miracle you've seen in your life, and how was the Lord's hand apparent?
So we've had a lot of miracles. So I have 4 kids with my ex-wife. And then my wife and I got remarried 5 years ago. And it's been kind of a roller coaster. She didn't have any kids or anything.
Mm.
And then we wanted more of our own. And when we had our baby, our first one, his name is Remington, we were told the entire pregnancy that it's a girl. And so literally the entire time, every ultrasound we went to, which we went to multiple, because she was, we did IVF to get him. And so you do a lot more ultrasounds usually.
Yeah, yeah.
Entire time we were told girl, and yeah, it came out a boy, and we're like, oh my goodness, like, that was already kind
Surprise.
of a roller coaster. When he was born, he had a condition. It's hard to kind of explain, but he had to have multiple surgeries from month number 6 on. He's
Oh,
had 5 total. He's now 3 years old, or he'll be 3 in July of this year, and he's doing great. So he's totally fine. Really happy. Loves basketball. Loves cards like his dad. And so during some of the procedures, they're really rough. 3-4 hours long sometimes.
I can't imagine.
Oh, it's crazy. And after one of his procedures, about a week later, he had gotten an infection that we weren't really aware of.
Oh,
And he was just like screaming in pain all day. And we're like, something is so off here.
mm-hmm.
Something seems wrong. And so we were in Utah County, and there's now a new hospital for children called Primary Children's Hospital in Utah County, which is only about probably 25 minutes away from our house.
Yeah.
And that's where we've been doing all the stuff at. It's all actually been in the one in Salt Lake because they have specialized people and equipment there for him. And we got in the car because we were like, hey, we got to go to the emergency room. Our son's screaming in pain, like something's wrong, obviously. And so as we were driving, all I could think about as I was driving, and he was literally just in the back seat, just screaming. Every like 2 minutes, I think it was like every 2 minutes he was just screaming, and then he would kind of calm and then scream again. As I was driving there, I just got this prompting like, drive to Salt Lake. And there was no reason for it. There was really like, they're literally the same hospitals, same trained people for kids 18 and younger, or 17 and younger.
Yeah.
And as we passed by that hospital, my wife noticed that we were passing it because it's right there off the highway. You can see it.
Yeah.
And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "We're going to Salt Lake." And I can only imagine how mad she was on the inside.
I would have
me.
been furious.
Oh yeah. I mean, and she didn't show an ounce of it.
Oh, bless her.
This is probably, I think it was like 10:30 at night.
Oh my goodness.
March, it's still snowing, and yeah, it was crazy. I was just going, and I'm like, we need to go to Salt Lake. And then she finally just like had faith. Okay, like we're going to go to Salt Lake.
Yeah.
And we got there and pulled in. I mean, my wife's, I'm sure, still upset at me. And we got checked in. Waiting room wasn't busy, which is really uncommon for that hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And got back there, got with the nurse. And we're like, yeah, he has this condition. And he goes, oh, I had that. And we're like, what? Like, because it's actually more common than people think. But it's only in boys. And they were like, wow, okay. Like, he actually knows. We don't have to explain the whole scenario.
Nice.
And all the records were there and everything. And so he ended up that night having to go into surgery, emergency surgery, and get what they call a bladder catheter put in to drain his bladder.
Mm-hmm.
And this was all during his actual longer 3 to 4 hour surgery was scheduled for the next week, but we went up to the Lehigh one. And just a huge blessing that like my mom was able to come right over to our house, watch the kids. We could drive up there because they told us if we weren't able to go to Salt Lake, they actually wouldn't have been able to help us in Lehigh at all.
Really?
Like, no, Lehigh wouldn't have done anything. We would have just flighted them up to the Salt Lake one.
Oh my goodness.
That same nurse, had the same condition, understood everything, right?
Wow.
And then, ironically, it was a Saturday night. Literally that Sunday morning, we came home and my wife went to church.
Wow.
And I stayed home with him. He was in a lot of pain and a little groggy. But so the week after that, we were considering whether or not we should do the surgery because they actually pushed the surgery up. They called us and they're like, hey, we probably need to do the surgery sooner. Because of his
emergency room visit?
Yeah. And they actually, no, you know what it was? So part of it was that they could move it to whenever. But now that I'm thinking about it, they called us and they said, hey, this is super rare. So we had to have 2 surgeons in the room at all times. And we had 2 specific ones that had been working on them for the previous surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, hey, this is super rare, but we have a cancellation for both of your surgeons on the following week, basically.
Yeah.
And the following week before that, so basically back it up a little bit and gets the bladder catheter put in, has to get it replaced like a day or 2 later. We opt. So really quick,
did he had an infection because his bladder was backing up? Like, was it like kidney infection or bladder infection?
Yeah. Like UTI. Yeah.
UTI.
It was really,
that was
really
just
bad.
like getting horrible. Okay.
Oh yeah. Okay. It was like, he couldn't basically pee at all. And so he wasn't able to get, we thought he was constipated and, it turns out he couldn't pee.
That's so awful. And how old is he at this point?
So he would have been over, let's see, we've been close to 1.
Yeah.
Trying to think of what, 6 months. Yeah, it would have been March. So yeah, you would have been, yeah, like 7 months, seven or
Oh,
8 months.
wow. Okay.
I have
Yeah.
to call,
Sorry.
maybe I
Keep
can call
going.
my wife. No, you might have to edit out something. But I'm trying to think of how old he was at the time. She's been such a blur.
But still just so
Okay,
young.
I'll have to think about it.
Yeah. So
But
young.
yeah, he was really young. For having that many surgeries and dealing
Yeah.
with everything he dealt with, right?
Yep.
And so had the bladder catheter put in. The infection was so bad they were kind of concerned, so they put him on an antibiotic. And then we had to get the bladder catheter replaced like 2 days later, I think. And we were sitting there in the emergency, or like trying to think of like the clinical room kind of, because they had to do it in a special x-ray room, like the 3D x-ray or whatever you call it.
Yeah. To see.
And they're like, we can either knock him out to replace this, or you can just hold him down. And literally we'll have it in and out in like 10 minutes. And I just thought about it, and I said, I'll just hold him down. And I think the nurses were kind of surprised. And I'm like, I don't know. I just don't feel like, he needs to get put under. And I think it was either that day or the next day. They're like, hey, we have a cancellation for Tuesday, which I think was like 4 days later. If you want to get him in sooner. And lo and behold, we just so happened to that same week, we have our scheduled temple sealing for my wife and I on that Saturday. So literally his surgery got pushed up to the Tuesday, and our temple sealing was on Saturday.
Wow.
And we were like, oh my goodness, like, do we cancel it? What do we do? And we just kind of kept going forward with everything and just kept moving forward and pushing through, because the surgery for this one was big surgery. And, it's just incredible to think that going back, like, and looking at all of this situation to when he was very first born, supposed to be a girl, came out, hey, it's a boy.
Yeah.
Throughout all of that whole situation, he was honestly probably the most positive. He was in pain a lot because of the surgeries and everything. But I think going along the way, just trying to listen to the Spirit, because sometimes I think people think, oh, it's just intuition or whatever it may be. And it's like, no, there's someone else there pushing you. Whether you be a man, a woman, a kid, an older person, like, it doesn't matter who you are. Like, there's someone there to push you along throughout this whole process. And you may not realize it in the moment, but if you just sit down, whether it be, say, a small prayer, say a big prayer, it's incredible, by listening to that Spirit. Not that I'm like all spiritual and like this perfect person, right? But I think if you just slow down and listen, you can really know. And we ended up getting sealed in the temple that Saturday, and it was a wonderful experience with our family there. And Remington was able to be there. Even though he's in pain, we have these wonderful pictures of us just coming out, and he's just so happy. And so it was wonderful.
That's incredible. I just think you're right, like, about this. A lot of times people think like, well, is it God or is it me? And I'm just like, why don't we just attribute it all to God? Like, can we go wrong doing that? I feel like just giving him all the glory, even like if it was my own brain waves thinking the thing, like the only way that I have brain waves is because of him, and I just think that he really does want to bless us. And sometimes we can get caught up in the, like, why didn't he do A, B, and C? Like, why didn't the miracle happen that Remington was just born perfectly whole and that he didn't need any of these things? But what I've realized is that we can either get caught up in asking those kinds of questions, or we can turn and ask the questions of, like, what can we learn from these experiences? And being able to recognize the Lord's hand in our lives and the miracles he gives us, big and small, humbles me. It makes me a better disciple of Jesus Christ to be able to bow down and say, this wasn't me, this was him. Thank you. And I think we can get to a spiritual maturity place where miracles can look like a bunch of different things. They can look like little little coincidences, and they can even look like trials sometimes that get put in our place. And I just have such a testimony that if we rely on Jesus Christ, he can make any of these, he can sanctify any of these difficult experiences, any surgeries, any mental illness, any trials that we find in our lives. Like, we can find miracles there if we decide to rely on Jesus Christ.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm so glad that it's turned out so well. And I still am so excited that you guys were able to be sealed. It's so fun. It's so amazing.
It's incredible. Yeah, I don't know if the adversary had anything to do with any of the situations, but I definitely felt throughout all of it, I definitely felt for some reason really positive about everything. Like everything's going to be okay. And I felt really positive, but I felt God's love throughout all of it. And I do feel like there was someone there that was pushing me further to just stay positive and have faith that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, and that's another miracle as well. All right, let's do question number 3 for you.
Yes.
Which you pointed out the capital so I'm going to read it like the capital SO that it is.
Yes.
Okay. What makes you so excited about the gospel of Jesus Christ?
Really, I think what the world in general is lacking, and honestly, sometimes myself, is lacking that personal connection to some other person that is an all-knowing and all-loving person. I have this. I've been listening to a few near-death type experiences on YouTube. I'm really cautious what I watch. I don't want it to be like these experiences where they're like, I saw aliens and all these things, but they're more like ones that you can tell they're coming from a genuine place and the common theme behind all of them is when they're passing through the other side of the veil, or maybe they're not quite there yet, who knows, and they get there, all they can feel is love. It's a very common theme.
Wow.
All I felt was wrapped in love. And I think that's what, I struggle sometimes feeling love in other ways that other people are going to do it. But I think that Jesus Christ in general, he's our brother. He died for us because he loves us. If that doesn't show how much he loves us, I don't know what does. He's crucified in a very hard way, but he did it for us. And I think that's why I get so excited is that, there's other religions out there that maybe believe in this or that or whatever. But I feel like the common theme with Jesus Christ is love, kindness, charity. But I think it's all love.
And I was listening to a podcast today, I think the Comeback podcast. Yeah. And one of the guests on there was talking about when Jesus is talking to the woman taken in adultery and how he is just with her. Like, he is just there with her. And he says a lot of times in the Christian world, we talk about John 3:16, which is like, to love. But then the next verse in 17, if I'm remembering this correctly, is that he hasn't come to condemn the world. That's not why he's here. It's the opposite. He's here to love us. He's just here to love us and save us. And there's no condemnation. And this guest on the podcast just said, that's where Jesus Christ lives. That's where he does all of his work, is in the love space. There's no, he's not in the judgment space. He's in the love space. And I'm kind of like you, like, at least I would also say I've had a difficult time, like, feeling love in my life, or at least just telling myself that, like, I don't need it to survive. Like, I can go on and I don't need to look for that. But what I'm realizing is I need it, and I need to feel God's love, and I need to know that I'm feeling it. And it's not shameful or weak to ask, like, do you love me? And that it's kind of a scary, exciting thing to put yourself out there. And I mean, I've had faith in other things and I've experienced other miracles, but for some reason I feel cautious about asking to feel God's love.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something I'm working on. So I love that you brought that up. I'm really glad that you brought that up, that love is something to really be excited about, like this eternal, all-encompassing love.
Yeah. Because I think that pretty much nowhere you can't really hide. You can't
You can't
hide
hide. You
from.
think you're hiding, but you
Yeah.
haven't. Like he can
Yeah.
still see you.
Yeah,
He
you
can
can,
still
it
see you.
doesn't matter if you hide underneath two blankets or one blanket, or if you try to hike to
Or
the ends
under
of
a
the earth.
rock. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
I think that's why I get so excited, because the more, I was away from the church for a little while. I wasn't really like against it. It was more just like I didn't go when I first got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled. The first Christmas that I was truly alone, I didn't have my four kids.
Oh,
Um,
that
you
must have
know,
been so hard.
I kind of thought it was, but at first, I was like, I had a bunch of people messaging me like, "Hey, you doing okay? You doing whatever?" I
Yeah.
really just hung out at my house and sat there, and I was like, "Man, first off, this is really boring without kids." Even though it's nice to have a break of, go on date nights or whatever. Um, but it was kind of the first time I really ever truly felt alone, because I had my oldest daughter when I was 17 in high school, and it was, ever since then I haven't really had an opportunity to be alone fully, and it was the first time I had it. And in that moment I kind of had to make a choice, like, am I gonna be positive about this, or am I gonna get sad? And I think oftentimes it's easy to go to the sad part, like, oh, hey, what have I amounted to, and kind of go the depression route. But I just finally got up and I was like, I'm just going to go for a hike, which was a terrible idea because it was, December in Utah and it's snowing. But just being outside. So I think that's what we forget, is that, like I mentioned earlier, you can't hide. Um, he's there just waiting for you to come to him through prayer, and he will love you no matter what mistakes we all make. Because I can tell you right now, I have made thousands and thousands of mistakes that I've had to turn to prayer for forgiveness, and I feel that forgiveness when I pray.
What your story reminds me of is a man got up in our ward one time or gave a talk or a testimony, and he said, the most impactful Thanksgiving I ever had was the Thanksgiving I chose to fast. And I think it was kind of the same situation where he happened to be without family, not because he was divorced, but I think just
Yeah.
he was in one spot and everybody else was somewhere else. And he was alone, and he was like, I think I'm just going to fast today. And he said that was the most impactful Thanksgiving of like, my true Thanksgiving was showing to show the Lord. I would go without food and honor him on that day and show him my gratitude through that sacrifice he could make. And so, yeah, just turning those experiences on their heads and trying to figure out, okay, well, how can we make the best of this situation? Number one, but then like, how can we feel God's love in this situation? And how can we use it as a springboard for the future, whatever other trials we come and that we come to face, or anytime we feel alone, like, are we truly alone? And do we remember the times he found us in our solitary spaces? So yeah, I love
That's
that
incredible.
example.
Fasting on Thanksgiving.
I know, right? I thought about that this year, and I was like, no, never. No.
Sweet potatoes, man. That's where it's at. You get like
the
the
marshmallows
yams,
on
or
top.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh goodness, all the turkey. That's incredible. Yeah, I just think it feels like there's a lot of, I can't really explain it right now. It feels like there's a lot of more hatred in the world. Almost not even really hatred. It feels like it's more just like a selfishness. Like, what do I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be driving on I-15 for you Utah drivers, I'm sorry. It gets a little crazy out there. Or whether it be going to church, trying to feel something and not getting an answer that same day.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it. Like, what do I get out of this? And it's like, you kind of got to go with the flow on kind of what you're thinking. Like the member you mentioned in your ward, or
Yeah.
I get bored of the testimony, it's like, well, I'm just going to do this for Thanksgiving. And maybe it was a prompting, who knows? And all of a sudden it kind of changes mindset. But like, you can't just go to church, pray, go to church and sacrament and expect the person to get up there and bear a testimony and talk about Thanksgiving dinner, about going without, basically. You have to maybe sometimes wait and listen and have a sincere heart instead of just seeking an answer to a question is great, but not putting forth the effort to try to feel the love and feel for yourself what God and Jesus is trying to teach you. Because it's like all of a sudden we don't get an answer or we don't feel that love, and it's like, okay, well, it's game over. Then I'm not going back to church because I don't feel, I don't feel anything. And it's like, if you come to our ward, you're just going to hear lots of kids screaming. You're barely going to be able to hear the speakers.
Yeah. Right.
So I think that's the biggest thing is like, you gotta search for that love of Jesus Christ, but you also have to be willing to share what to other people that may not be feeling that love. Like, hey, come to church, come do these things and feel the love that I feel, or that you may need, or that I need, because I can tell you right now, every week I need it. So
that's a beautiful testimony. And yeah, a great reminder that we need to come to feel love. And I don't think that we're like gathered in wards for a reason. Like we're together for a reason. And it's always an opportunity to share love and feel love. And if we're lacking in one of or both of those areas, then go, your church next Sunday, there are people waiting for you to come and help feel love. And I don't know a better way to feel God's love. I guess I have felt God's love a lot while performing service for others. It's like glowing explosion of my heart, just so happy after driving away from whatever it was, just feeling that love, to be a conduit for his love so that it can come through you and be expressed to others is what builds us up, brings us together, and brings us closer to Jesus Christ. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
All right, Jordan, that brings us to the end of our episode today, but we can't let you leave without asking you the famous final question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Jordan, why do you stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Getting emotional just thinking about it. I stay because I know that God is real, that Jesus Christ died so that we could go back and be together forever with our eternal families. And I go because families are forever. And that's what the church stands on and believes in, and knows that through the power of covenants that we make to our spouses, to our kids, that we can be together forever after this life here on earth.
Beautiful. Jordan Hasting, not Hastings.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your testimony and your experiences. I have been edified and I can't wait to share this with the world. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before you hop off, before you click away, I would just like to invite you to think about, when have you felt God's love in your life through a miracle that you've seen? And if you are having a hard time and you're feeling like you haven't had miracles and God is not showing up and you're wondering, is he even real? Is this even worth doing anymore? I want you to go search. Go on a search, this treasure hunt. Find God's love in your life somehow. Go through your old journals, look in your scripture notes, even go back to pictures in your phone. Be led by the Spirit exactly to the place to remind you of a time that you felt God's love and a miracle of mercy or guidance or love in your life. Where is it? Go find it. Okay. We need to remind ourselves of these things. It's easy to forget, but to remind ourselves helps to keep us centered and focused on who we are, where we're going, and who loves us. And it is God and his son, Jesus Christ. They love us so much. And I'm working on feeling that as well. So guys, thank you so much for being here on the YSA podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a couple other videos here on the side. If you'd like to click to the next one and listen to another episode, or subscribe to the channel, I really appreciate all the subscribes, all the comments, even the antagonistic ones. You're bringing more attention to my page. So thanks so much, guys. Anyway, thanks for being with us here on the YSA podcast, and we will see you next week. New episodes every Tuesday. Love ya. And thank you for staying with us. The Why I Stay podcast is a faith-based podcast exploring the lives and experiences of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This podcast is not produced or endorsed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we do love that church. All rights reserved. And a great big shout out to Fast Sounds from Pixabay for the amazing and jammin' intro-outro music. Thanks, guys.